Hello everyone, my name is Shawn, and today I'll be talking about the recovery palette. This should be hopefully a very nice overview, no code, but hopefully inspire some people. Before I jump into it, I want to go into a quick, side chat. I think one of the biggest problems we face in blockchain right now is just having users be able to easily interact with the blockchain systems. I think, especially kind of at the level where we're building stuff at Parity, the interaction process is normally a user directly talks to the blockchain. And this is clearly an awful experience. Like, it's just not meant to be. And so, while Substrate is a platform for building blockchains, definitely, the larger ecosystem that's going to adopt Substrate is going to be involved with people who are touching Rust, but also touching all the layers in between the user and the actual blockchain. And I hope there will be many, because this will actually bring great experiences to users and allow them to actually use the blockchain. So when I was thinking about designing this palette, I was thinking about, okay, well, what kind of features can I implement at the blockchain level which would help people like my parents to actually use blockchains? And I think one of the common things we see in the space is, the fear of having all this money attached to this private key and then losing that private key and having nothing you can do about it. And this is not a behavior that I think the average person outside the blockchain space is used to. Like, there's always someone you can call or someone you can talk to or some lawyer who can recover, your lost money. But in the blockchain world, this is both good and bad. This recovery palette hopefully will be a way to simplify the user experiences and make just using the blockchain a little bit that much easier. So I'll jump into it, but that's the context of kind of where this all came from. Yeah, so before we even talk about the recovery palette, let's talk about multi-signatures. Multi-signatures are, it's a type of verification which requires multiple keys to authenticate or authorize access to some underlying resource. Has everyone here heard about multi-sigs? Maybe the multi-signature wallet, other formats? Okay, cool. Multi-sigs can kind of come in two ways. I think cryptographically, you can design cryptographic algorithms which allow you to conglomerate a bunch of signatures into a single signature, and using some fancy crypto math, which I don't fully understand myself, get a signature which represents the signatures of many individuals. But also you can do aggregation. Basically, you can track also individual signatures and use some additional logic to act like a multi-signature. So when we're working in the runtime, it's really easy to be able to say like, hey, I see multiple transactions from these different users all saying like, approve or not approve. And we can basically create a multi-signature in the logic by basically saying, have these set of users approved or not approved something and do some action based off of that. So we also have some aggregation methods. And again, the aggregation can actually be done on-chain and off-chain. So you might imagine, instead of sending one payload with one signature, you can send one payload with many signatures in it. So these are kind of two different ways to approach multi-signatures. And so in Substrate, we actually already have different kind of forms of multi-signatures. Obviously, our SR25519 cryptography supports in it a cryptographic multisig. But we also have this utility palette. This is actually relatively new. I'm not talking too much about it, but inside of the utility palette, we support generalized aggregate multisig. So basically, any set of users in a Substrate blockchain can create a multisig with basically, n number of people, and I'll talk about this more, but like m number of people out of n can approve some transaction and basically submit a transaction on behalf of the group of people in this multisig. And then also we have things like the collective palette, which maybe is kind of a stretch to call this a multisig, but basically you can have some aggregate approval or transactions of users in addition to some governance rules and basically create new origins. And these origins can be used within the runtime. So you can kind of consider all of these different things, ways you get multiple voices to kind of become one voice, right? And that's kind of where the multi-signature stuff is. So when we talk about the recovery palette, well, what is it really? Well, the recovery palette is an M of N social recovery tool. It allows users to recover their accounts if the private key is lost or any type of authentication mechanism is lost. So one thing that's important to realize is that on Substrate, it's built really generally. And I believe it doesn't even assume necessarily that the account system that we use has to be like a public-private key pair. Like, there could be other authentication mechanisms. But this recovery palette actually doesn't use any type of cryptographic system. So you're able to still recover an account no matter how you set up your blockchain, your Substrate blockchain, to authenticate to the system. But in speaking in terms of multisig, what we do actually is it is an aggregate on-chain multisignature, where you can basically specify a set of users who can create a multi-sig, and allow access to your account. And so let's go into this and walk through it step by step, and hopefully you can see kind of how it works and what it does. So how does it work? Okay, well, if you want to use the recovery palette, the first thing you need to do is set up a recovery configuration. So ideally, you have access to your account that you want to make it recoverable, and you have to basically go through and configure it so that it can be recovered in the future. To do that, first you need to select a set of friends that you trust. This is configurable, and basically it's a set of other users in Substrate who you trust to say that they can go through and vouch for you later and say that, this person's lost the account and this is the real person and this is who we should give the account access to. This is where the N comes from. Then you also choose a threshold, M. So basically you need to pick some subset, so it can be as much as N is, but it can be less too, where basically these are the number of friends of the list that need to approve of a recovery process for you to actually be able to recover your account, right? This is the M of N. Finally, we pick a minimum delay period. So this is kind of something I'll touch on a little bit more later, but basically from the beginning of a new recovery process, like someone trying to recover your account, there's some delay period where we say even if you collected all of the approval messages, you still have to wait this long to actually get access to your account. And this is the mechanism we'll actually be using to help prevent against some of the malicious attacks. But these are all 3 items which you can configure completely on your own to set up a recovery configuration for your account. The last thing you need is a configuration deposit. So as a runtime developer, one of the things that's important is that if you're introducing some new storage item to the runtime, it's important that in general, you keep a deposit from the user who's storing some information. This does a few things. One, incentivizes the user to clean up their information. So if you go through, if you write the right runtime logic, they add some data to your blockchain, they take some deposit, they remove the data, they get the deposit back. So they're incentivized to naturally clean up the blockchain. But also it makes sure that that data isn't just like kind of floating around for no reason. I think a good example of this is like, you can think of the existential deposit in balances as kind of a deposit, right? Like a user who's in our system who we're tracking the balances must have at least this much funds, right? And if they ever go underneath it, we clean up all of their information. So this is kind of where you should be thinking about as a runtime developer, always making sure that if you're storing data, you have a deposit for that. But to set up a recovery configuration, you also set up a deposit. Okay, so I guess step 2, if you actually want to use the recovery palette, is to lose your account. So I would recommend don't follow this step in general, but the idea is that if this happens and it's uncontrollable, that because you set up a recovery configuration, you can go ahead and actually recover your account. So step 3 is to initiate a recovery process. So it's important here to be transparent about the fact that this recovery palette does not actually give you your private key back. The result of this process is not that you like magically discover the information that you had lost. Pretty much nothing can do that. What we can do basically is give another account access to make calls on behalf of your lost account. And so the first thing you need to do to initiate the recovery process is to create a new account. And you need to fund this account with some money that's enough to pay for initiating the recovery process. So again, similarly to creating a recovery configuration, we take a deposit. If you want to start a recovery process, we also take a deposit from the user. And this serves 2 purposes. 1, for storing the data, but 2, to also prevent malicious actors. And again, we'll talk about this at the very end. But you will have to, if you lost your account, let's say it has like, $100,000 in it, some crazy amount of money, right? You might have to go ahead and pay like $100 to actually start this recovery process. Seems worth it overall. And all of these deposits that you place are all returned to you. So in the whole recovery process, the only thing you pay are transaction fees. Okay, so then you need to initiate the recovery process. Basically, you go and you call this pallet and you say, hey, here's my lost account, here's my deposit, let's start the recovery process. So next you need to contact your friends to vouch for your recovery attempt. So basically you had this list of friends, you need to go reach them, whether it's on-chain if you have some cool pallets in your runtime, or off-chain just giving them a phone call saying, hey, I lost my key, it's me, this is the information, please vouch that this is a good recovery attempt. Okay? At least M of N need to approve, so this is what you configured, this is what you've basically required to access your account. And then you need to wait for the delay period to pass, of course, right? And if all of this happens, you just claim your recovered account. It's that easy. At this point, you can now make calls with your lost account. So through this recovery pallet, we have a function which is called like as recovered. And basically, because you went through the process, you've claimed your account, you can go ahead and use the recovery pallet using account A to make a call through account B to any other pallet. So this recovery pallet system is actually will recover basically access to all other pallets in your system. This is much different than, like, for example, in the smart contract world, or if you were building something like a multi-sig on Ethereum, you would have to build different recovery logic for every single contract, because at the contract level, you're not able to do something like emulate the call of a user. That would be kind of a crazy thing to allow any user to do. But because we created this pallet, and because we created the recovery process, and we control the low-level blockchain logic, we're able to say something crazy like, you can call on behalf of this other user to any other pallet. So this one pallet makes your entire blockchain recoverable in some sense. Okay? So step 4, once you've claimed your account and you're able to make calls, you actually want to clean up your old account. So again, we cannot give you back your old account. There's nothing we can really do to, like, give you this private key that was lost. But what we can do is allow you to clean it up, move data over, and all will be good. So the first thing you want to do is close the recovery process. You'll use the recovery pallet to call itself using the other account, and you will close the recovery process, and you'll get your deposit back. You also remove your recovery configuration, right? So now no one else can recover your account, and you also get your other deposit back. Great, you have some money. Then what you can do is you can basically call all of the other modules doing things that you need to do to clean it up. So you can unbond your staking positions, you can remove identity information, basically call any other pallets through the recovery pallet acting as this user. Finally, the last step probably in this process is just to transfer all your funds back. So you can use the recovery pallet to call the balances pallet to send funds from your old account to your new account. And what's nice is once you've sent all of your funds and basically you have no more funds left, your account is totally cleaned up from the system. So we have an automatic hook which basically cleans up everything, including this recovery. So once you've sent all the funds over, recovery pallet automatically removes the link between your two accounts, and this account now is totally kind of gone in the wind. So let's talk about the malicious recovery attempt. So this hopefully all sounds great, but how do we protect your account from being stolen by someone else, by being recovered by someone else? So let's go through the process again. So you have set up a recovery configuration already, but now a malicious user initiates the recovery process. They send your not lost account, and they send some funds. Okay? They go and they trick your friends into vouching for your recovery attempt. And actually, if you're a security person, you will know that most security problems aren't actually computer software problems. They're actually social manipulation problems. People calling, trying to convince people to basically that things that aren't true are true, and getting them to act in a certain way. So they trick your friends, and they vouch for your attempt. Now, even if all of this craziness happens, hopefully your friends would never actually do that. They still need to wait for the delay period, right? And so they got all of the things happening, but they still need to wait. And you, as a person who can see things happening on the blockchain, can see that someone else is recovering your account. Like, you have access to the account. You can still see that someone else is recovering. So what can you do? You can just, this is exactly what happens. Like, you're not me, right? So what you can do is just close the recovery process. So you can, through the recovery pallet, say, hey, I have my account. I can prove it by making a transaction. I can call the recovery pallet and say, close this recovery attempt, and I take the deposit from the user. So basically, people who are maliciously trying to attack your account is like a honeypot for you. You just get to take their money that they put down to try to steal your account. And there's no way for them to steal your account as long as you just check that the recovery attempt is not malicious. So additionally, if you have a bunch of friends who approve the recovery attempt, they're probably not friends you want to keep, so you can go and update your configuration, change them out, right? But in general, all you really need to do to keep your account safe is check once every delay period. Again, you configure this delay period, but you check once every delay period. As long as there's no one trying to recover your account, you're good. Otherwise, if people are recovering your account, just get the free money. It's awesome. Okay, so other considerations, so things to talk about. So first, if you're going to be using this, obviously an important part is configuring an appropriate delay period, right? So the longer you set your delay period, the less often you need to check. So it's probably in general better to set a pretty long period here. Like even if you actually lost your key, waiting 3 months is kind of better than allowing a malicious actor to get like 3 days to access your account. I can even imagine we have separation of accounts. We have like the stash accounts, controller accounts, all that kind of stuff. You might want to just set different configurations based off of what the account can do, right? So you can control this. It's up to you to determine. I imagine some people who have like all their life savings in some blockchain account maybe wants to set like 1 year, right? Like waiting 1 year is not such a big deal if you know you can recover it, right? That's awesome. Specify a high threshold. So threshold is another thing that you can control. So you could pick 100 friends and say the threshold is 1. So what does that mean? Well, that means that any friend on your account can basically steal your account from you, right? If you pick only 2 as your threshold, any 2 of them can coordinate and attack your account. They can basically approve themselves and get in. So it's important to set a high threshold such that people aren't able to easily get the approvals on your account. And furthermore, it's important to pick your friends wisely. So it's important to pick from a diverse set of friends. So you don't want to pick everyone I know at parity because they're more likely to be able to coordinate with one another. I want to pick people who I know from the US, people who I know from college, people I know from here that I keep in touch with, and keeping them kind of separate from each other so that they don't have any easy way to necessarily coordinate and attack my account. And then in general, you should update them regularly. Like life changes. So one of the nasty things about some other multi-sigs is that once you set it up, there's no way to update the configuration, like whether it's like hard-coded or whatever. What's nice about this configuration is that you can always update your friends. So as life changes, as time goes on, as you make new friends, as you get in fights with people, as you break up or get married or divorced, whatever, you can update this friend list and make sure they stay up to date so that you always have the right set of friends who are looking over your account, right? Some other ideas, just real quick. So one of the things we didn't do in this recovery palette is keep your friends list secret. So right now that's all public information. It probably wouldn't be so hard to add additional kind of obfuscation layers to keep the friends list secret, but for simplicity, and I think one of the things I had at the beginning of the slide is calling simple and easy. Like one of the nice ways to keep something like this safe is to simplify the logic. Like to really keep things simple and easy to read. And so right now we have the friends list open. That might be something that you want to change. Also, the recovery process is currently public. This is obviously a way that you can verify, like, hey, someone's trying to steal my account. But I could imagine a world where you might want the recovery process to be secret. So this could also be something you can modify or tweak if you want to make your own palette. And then also it would make sense, again, we're talking about layers outside the blockchain. It might make sense to have a notification system. So like, it would be cool if I could sign up for some service, get an email whenever someone's trying to recover my account, and I can just be pinged rather than having to go check all the time. So an offline notification system would be really awesome as kind of a wrapper to this whole project. Yeah, one more thing I wanted to note, that this recovery palette is included in your Substrate blockchain, but there are also other similar ways that you can protect your keys. So another project that our head of security, Kirill, had been working on is this thing called Parity Banana Split. And this basically allows you to take your private key and to use Shamir secret sharing, which basically takes that private information and splits it among a number of different QR codes and papers. And very similarly, you share this QR code paper with a bunch of your friends and family. And if you want to recover the data that's in there, the private data, you just need to get half plus 1 of the QR codes back. So this is another method, again, off-chain that you can secure a key. Maybe you want to use both, but you can see these are very similar methods and things that are available to you outside of the recovery palette. So yeah, I'm happy to take any questions, and I hope that this was clear to everyone. Yeah. Good question in the back.
Questions?
Thanks. Back.
Thank you. You said that every user can pick the individual M, N, and delay period, or is that set once for the blockchain level?
Every user can pick their own M, N, and delay period. So the kind of limits that we have at the runtime level is one, you as a runtime developer, you select the deposit amount. So the 2 different deposits that your blockchain holds, the user doesn't select that, the runtime engineer selects that. We also have a limit on the runtime developer can choose the limit to the maximum number of friends. So like a user can't be something crazy and store like 1 trillion friends on the blockchain. So you get to pick those limits. But within those limits, you as an individual user can pick any number of friends up to the max limit. your deposit will actually increase based on the number of friends you pick, so it increments slightly. And then you can also pick the subset of them, the threshold of that. And you can pick any delay period which matches the entire block limit. So that's all configurable per user. And I think it's actually really important because, one person's account which has $5 and one person's account that has $5 million should be treated completely differently, and it should be configured at the user level.
Any more questions?
Can you explain why?
Wait for the mic.
Oh, sorry.
For the light.
Can you explain why you would clean up the old account if the new account can now act in its place?
Yeah, so you don't technically have to. If you wanted to, you could forever use account B, call recovery pallet, then call whatever you want to do. I have just a gut feeling that doesn't sound very ergonomic in terms of I can't imagine many wallets will support it. I can't imagine many UIs will support it. I can't manage it won't be a good experience for you as a user, right? It may be that the situation you're in, and you can use the palette that way. There's nothing stopping you from using the palette that way. It just doesn't sound like the greenfield scenario. It seems like you're really stuck in some rut. And ideally, all the other palettes should be in a situation where you can clean them up and transfer any state to the other one. That's the ideal world. But yeah, nothing stops you from doing that.
Isn't it more costly?
You're talking about fees. So there will be I think actually the fee of calling as recovered. There's almost no logic. There's one storage lookup, and I think we're not increasing the fee right now for that. But we could if we wanted to. The fee right now, the fee that you pay calling as a recovered account is exactly the same as what the call you would make is. Yeah.
Any more questions? No? Oh,
Are there multiple recovery sets possible? So one of them is for me, for my own account, and second one for friends, for example. Is it a dumb question?
No, I missed it. So you want to set up, so you have an account and you want to set up 2 recovery configurations for it? This is not currently supported right now. But it would be easy to add it, but it's not currently supported. Right now, there's just kind of one configuration for one account. One of the things that's important with runtime development, I think, is that having very clear state machines is important for making sure that you don't run into these weird runtime logic or fringe scenarios. So if you actually look at the pathway I walked you down, actually look at the code, at any point in time, any user has exactly one situation. So you can have a recovery configuration set up and no active recovery. You can have a recovery set up and an active recovery. You can have no recovery set up. That means you, by definition, cannot have an active recovery set up. We have it so that the state is always in a clear thing. Introducing things like multiple recovery methods can be kind of more complicated when you want to close a recovery process or you want to remove a recovery process. You need to look at all the other existing recoveries. It's totally doable. I did not design it as part of this system.
I guess you can also tweak the threshold and the friends, and then keep 50 friends in your drawer.
Yeah. So I think the comment here is that if you really think these 2 people are completely separate, you could have 100 people total, and then a threshold of 50, and then you can just kind of work on the one half or the other half. You contact all your friends, you contact all your family, or something like that. I don't know.
No, I mean that you create 50 imaginary keys that you add as your friends and
Oh,
store
right.
them in your drawer.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you could create other keys and transfer. One more thing that you brought up when we were talking about this earlier today, which was very interesting to me, was actually you can use maybe some kind of so going back to what I was saying before. I'm just thinking about other ways that you can use our multi-sigs and Substrate and keep things safe. The utility palette, I have it here. The utility palette, in addition to allowing you to do multi-sigs, also allows you to create sub-accounts. And so you can imagine if you want to do a multi-sig, where basically one key is your account that you normally have access to, another key is some account that your phone stores. You can basically create a 2FA system on your Substrate chain, right? You could basically say that I have a key on my computer, I have a key on my phone, and every time I want to sign a message, I use both to then access it. And so you basically create a 2FA system on top of the utility palette. This is another way you could approach some kind of security practices around your account. It'd be kind of interesting. Yeah. Any other questions? Cool. Well, I think everyone should add this palette to their runtime, and hopefully it will save your parents too from using the blockchain.
Cool. Thank you so much, Shawn.